Now, I'm not entirely sure why, but whenever a game is forgotten, banned, or deleted, there seems to be a sudden growing interest from people, and I'm exactly the same. It's like once we know we can no longer have it, that's when we want it the most. PT is probably the best example of this, a horror game that was scrapped, and now we can only imagine how great it would have been. Something similar happened when I was recently recommended a few great videos covering a Flash game more than 10 years old, Hotel 626. And even though I watched a lot of scary movies when I was young and have played a lot of multi-million-dollar budget horror games since, interestingly, games like this have still left quite a mark and scared me a lot. Some of it, I'm sure, comes from me being a kid and naturally being more impressionable at the time, but that's not the full story, and I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way. Now, of course, when looking at it today, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people write a game like this off as a really simple jump scare simulator, but I think that would be too easy. This game was created by Doritos, but I wanted to find out how this was even connected to the company because that was the one thing I couldn't wrap my head around. It was to reintroduce two tortilla flavors, black pepper jack and smokin' cheddar barbecue, which are apparently quite good. Haven't tried them myself. These flavors came back from the dead, so to speak, so that's why we're seeing ghosts? But what's the game even about? The backstory is a little unclear. I mean, the whole experience is pretty short, requiring only about 15 minutes. Which is alright considering it's only a marketing stunt. When you start playing, you wake up from a nightmare in a hotel. You hear people screaming in the distance. When you walk out of your room, there's a creepy, long, dark corridor with flickering lights. Here we can see how the game blends real-life footage with 3D environments. Throughout the game, you try to escape the mysterious darkness and the ghostly entities that follow you. The element probably best executed is the atmosphere of this location. Most of what you're doing is just watching the cameraman, but it still works really well. The long corridors and creepy lighting create a sense of dread and makes you really uncomfortable. The fact that there isn't much of a story, oddly enough, kind of works in the game's favor because it adds a layer of mystery on why all of this is happening. Players fill in the gaps themselves and it tailors the experience to everyone a little bit differently. I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses for the game or anything like that, but the game knows what it is. It doesn't try cramming too much into a short 15-minute experience, and it knows where to stop. This is something that horror movies today still get wrong sometimes. When we know too much, it just kind of stops being scary. So for a while the game continues kind of like how you'd expect. You go into a creepy room and the only thing to see what's happening is to use a camera flash. The game does have jump scares, but I do have to say that it doesn't rely on them at all. It's still scary without the screaming noises. It's just one technique used. But it gets a lot better. Eventually you wake up in a room with a guy who talks to you. You might already hear it, but he's talking in reverse.
Horse, spider, candles.
He's giving you the clues to the passcode at the end of this room, and from what I heard, this passcode constantly changes, so you can't just get the combination from your friend who already played it. In the gameplay I found, he said hands, which on the wall have 9 digits, and spider, which on the wall has 8 legs. So the combination would be 9, then 8, and so on. But it's what follows that really blew my mind, and everybody else's. You're in a room with a bunch of Polaroids, and my first impression was, wow, those look real. At first I wasn't sure if Doritos was smart enough to put really bad pictures to convince us that they're real, but no, they're real. You can clearly tell by the quality that they were taken by crappy webcams, which sells the effect. And the game doesn't tell you that it's snapping a picture of you. At some point between starting to play and entering this dark room with the other guy like banging on the door behind you, which is already pretty creepy, you were photographed. Now I'm not entirely sure if this is even allowed, just showcasing random people's faces without their direct consent, but that's what made the internet fun back then. F it, just do it, let's see what happens, let's find out. It's very interesting because you would never find a company being this creative and taking risks like that today. All of this feels fairly advanced. It might not be perfect, but you can tell that the people behind the project actually cared. It stood out and there wasn't quite anything like it, which made the experience that much more unique. And people clearly celebrated the inventive nature of the game. And look at the promotional material for the sequel, Asylum 626. This is like a real point of view horror short film, and it's just an ad to sell chips. Why can't we get stuff like that today? By the way, the name 626 is referring to the play times. You can only play it from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., forcing you to play it during the night, which I think is an interesting idea. When I grew up, gaming was a lot less accessible. I mean, a lot of people had Xboxes and PlayStations, but my family didn't really get one until I was in high school. But up until then, when I wasn't at a friend's house, I could only play games on my dad's crappy small laptop, and there were a couple of games similar to this that were really freaky. Looking back, the lower quality and limited gameplay made it more exciting because it just made it more mysterious, if that makes sense. I mean, I've said this a couple of times on this channel. In horror, a lower quality can make for a better experience. Now it's pretty difficult to create something unexpected because pretty much any idea can be realized. It's crazy to think that they managed to make something so good using Flash Player. It shows how these limitations force the people behind the scenes to find creative solutions to the gameplay problems. That's, I think, the biggest difference this game exhibits compared to today. Now we have all the equipment available. All the software is cheaper, better designed, more user-friendly, and just runs a lot better. Almost every idea you have can be realized. Sure, it still takes a lot of work, but today there are a lot of possibilities that simply weren't accessible back then. The downside is that when every idea you have can be realized, it kind of stops you from being creative because there just isn't as big of a need for it. This is a problem that is also a little bit unique to horror because a lot of great horror movies are born out of limitations and the lack of a budget. Eventually, the game was taken down in 2011. It's not exactly clear why, but my guess is that the pictures might have had something to do with it. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Let me know if you guys played this game back in the day, or maybe there were different small horror experiences that were even more memorable to you. As always, I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.